Hello and welcome back to the Rearview podcast for Season 2, Episode 4, where, of course, we're going to be talking about the Imola Grand Prix, or the Emiliano Vergnano Grand Prix, or
Good
something
effort.
like that. Yeah, it's a fun Italian word. But either way, we're coming out of race 2, and it looks like we really might have a proper title fight on our hands, and that is very, very exciting. So let's not waste any time and get to talking about the race. And, of course, joining me to do that is going to be the wonderful Mr. Reese Keeble and Miss Ruth Buchanan. Hello, guys. How are you?
Hello.
Welcome back to the podcast. I mean, I'm saying that as if you haven't been here recently. You've been on every single episode, bar one from Ruth. So we're good. We're all right. We're all okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cracking.
Excited after the last race.
Let's get right. Let's get right into the race.
Let's get right into the news. Right then, coming out of race 2, 1 point is now separating the top 2 drivers, which is so exciting. We haven't had a title fight this close. It feels for a very long time. It wasn't as simple though in the race as one driver being 1 point ahead and it was just Max and Lewis at the front again. It was much more complicated than that. So let's talk about the exciting and dramatic race, which was all over the shop really. And let's start with a thing that really threw it up in the air more than anything, and that is the weather. Because more than anything, it was unpredictable, I think it's fair to say. For once, the F1 gods looked down on us and blessed us with some unpredicted rain, and it did catch people out. We saw Alonso take a trip into the gravel on the opening lap, on the first lap before they get to the grid. Leclerc took a spin on the formation lap. The conditions really spiced things up, particularly at the start of the race, where Hamilton seemingly couldn't get away off the line anywhere near as fast as Verstappen could, who geniusly put his car into second gear to start, get lower revs, less wheel spin, very smart. Hamilton didn't do that, and Verstappen from third to first. What did you guys make of that start? Because that was a very exciting part of the race for me. We'll go to Reese first. What did you make of Verstappen and Hamilton and Perez, obviously, who's on the second row, their start there? What did you think of that?
It was a very, very entertaining first corner. Well, first couple of corners, because they come back to back. But yeah, Max he had it. I don't know who told him or what made him think, I'm going to start it off in second. But what a wise choice. What a wise choice by the lad.
Definitely. Ruth, what did you make of it?
Yeah, he is renowned for being a really, really great wet driver. That's a really weird way to phrase it, but he always performs so well in wet conditions because he just has a greater understanding, obviously, from when he was learning in Holland, and it's always rainy there and everything. He just understands how to get the car to do what he wants it to do in those conditions. And I even bet Hamilton, as a 7 world-time champion, would not have thought of that. So it was just a great start from him all round.
Well, there was an interesting bit I saw from Sky afterwards. Anthony Davidson basically broke down the start. And of the front 3, Perez included, and we'll talk a bit more about Perez in a second because I'm sure Ruth has got a fair bit she wants to say about Perez this weekend. The Perez, who was also in that Red Bull, started in first gear. So I don't know if that's something Max sort of thought of on the way to the grid and thought, that's how I'm going to get a better start here. I'm not going to share that with anyone else. Or if the team instructed him, I don't know. But it was either way, it was the right decision because he got the start he needed after what was not an ideal qualifying for Max. He couldn't pit Perez. He couldn't pit Hamilton in the end over one lap. He made mistakes and fell to third. He did exactly what he needs to do to get that start, and he led the race from the first corner, really, didn't he? It was only one lap or so where he pitted and Hamilton went in front. So I think that is one of the most important parts of that race was the start, 100%. Right then, the start out of the way. Let's talk about something more controversial that happened in that race, and of course, I'm talking about Sergio Perez because. It was at this point in the podcast last week, we'd had the first talking point. We came on to Perez and said, he had a really hard qualifying. He went out in Q1 and then he had a failure on the formation lap, had to restart the car and start from the pit lane. He had a lot of troubles, but he had an excellent comeback in the race. This week, it's almost the reverse of that. He had his best ever qualifying, putting at P2. It was an excellent qualifying for him. He had a clean formation lap. When Charles Leclerc was spinning off, he was nice and sensible. He was at the front. He was keeping position. And then the race, what happened? He had a woeful race. It just kept going wrong. You can't seem to find a balance, apparently, between having a good qualifying and a bad race, or a bad qualifying and a good race. And I know, Ruth, you'll be itching to get your 2 cents in on this. But it all seemingly went wrong for Perez out there, most of the time through no fault other than his own. I think there was you couldn't blame the team for that. He lost lots of positions on the opening lap. He had lots of spins. He overtook under the safety car, which is a weird one that I can't wait to have a chat about, because that is one that I do not understand. And in the end, he only ended up bringing the car home in 11th place, 12th across the line, but 11th after Raikkonen's penalty. Let's just get your thoughts on this. Ruth, I'm going to go to you first, because I know you've got an opinion piece on Perez pre-written, ready for this. What are you thinking of Perez coming out of that race?
I seriously just think it proves exactly that anybody who gets in that car physically cannot perform how Red Bull want them to. Whether it's Gasly, Albon, Perez, anybody else, it's clearly not an issue with the drivers. It's clearly an issue with the car or with the team. And it just frustrates me that a really good driver like Albon has also lost a seat. Just all of these things that have contributed to it. Like Gasly, it looked really bad for him when he got dropped. I'm sure that's affected his future in F1 too, and how other teams will perceive him. And it's just so frustrating when you watch Perez doing, actually, I would say on average, the same Albon was doing. He hasn't outperformed Albon and, had a P1, P2 with Max or anything like that. And that's exactly why they swapped him for Albon, because they wanted him to perform in that way. And he cannot.
I think that being said, you have to look at the bigger picture from Perez, that he's only had 2 races. And one of those races, he's had a really good race and a bad qualifying. One of that races, he's had a really good qualifying and a bad race. If he puts that together, I think he will do well. I
think that's the thing. We haven't seen enough for me to definitively say Albon should have stayed in that car when he was dropped, or they shouldn't have dropped Gasly when they did. All of these things, because they never give enough time to a driver to see development. You're never going to have a great qualifying and a great race if you never give a driver an opportunity to learn and develop in a car. You can't put a driver in a car for one season and expect amazing results. Hamilton is only such a great driver and 7-time world champion because he's had the experience. He's had, every single weekend he never makes a mistake because he knows what he's doing because of the experience he has. But you can't expect the same from other drivers in your car when you don't give them that opportunity.
Yeah, like I say, Perez hasn't been there long enough to properly prove that yet, because Perez is that experienced driver. So I'm hoping eventually we do see him putting this together. But there's one thing in particular that I want to more take it with Reese here to hear what he thinks about this. And this is just a thing that I think is inexcusable, especially for a driver of Perez's experience. He knows the rules. He's been in Formula One for 10 odd years or so. He overtook under the safety car even. What is going on there, Reese?
It's a very weird one, isn't it? It's really strange. Like, I understand Ruth's point, by the way, the frustration, because I know that Ruth was like quite a big Albon fan, and I understand that frustration of, well, technically after these 2 races he's not done too well, but you got to look at the last race. I'd argue that he did do well in the last race. It's just his qualifying wasn't as good. But like you said, Tom, if he puts them 2 together, it'll be cracking. This race was, I'd argue, was hard for everyone. With the champion even going out, like, he should have been out of the race. If it wasn't for that red flag, literally about 2 seconds later, Hamilton, I don't think he was finished in the points. The fact that then also Bottas went out, Russell, who is also very experienced in that Williams, went out. Like, there was a lot of spins. Oh, I forgot his name now. It begins with an A. What's his name? Tom Hill.
Who?
He drives for Alpine. Alonso.
Alonso?
The fact that Alonso span, Vettel span, they're all world champions. So it was clear, like, a hard track, let's say. So I think it's a bit unfair to kind of judge him on this last race. Going back to the safety car thing, I mean, that was just ridiculous. I don't know whether he was too busy trying to concentrate on driving in the wet conditions, whether in his head he thought this is the formation lap, because you are allowed to do that on the formation lap. It literally, like, maybe because Leclerc did it on the formation lap, he thought, oh, maybe I can do it under the safety car. But that doesn't make any sense. It was obviously just like a lapse of judgment for him, I reckon.
Yeah, I agree with Reese there on the safety car issue. I'd be interested to hear the radio between Perez and Red Bull after he overtook to see whether it was just Perez made that decision, the team told him to, and they were confused. All of those things. But yeah, I agree with what Reese is saying, that the race was hard for everyone. I just disagree on the point that Perez, who has so much experience, finishing P11 is not an awful race for him. Because if it was Albon, because he's a rookie, he would be told that he is an absolutely awful driver in a great car who isn't performing well enough. So, yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong, 11's not perfect, but it's better than DNF, isn't it? And considering quite a lot of, like, not as many cars as we thought were going to DNF, but the fact that, like, Bottas went out, the fact that Vettel was literally spinning that much that he couldn't even get a decent lap under his belt. You know, that was a tricky circuit.
Did Vettel spin?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he had a little spin.
Vettel spun a couple of times, I think.
Did he? I thought Sainz span a lot.
Yeah, Sainz had a lot of spins, but I think Vettel span on, the chicane.
Did he?
I think he had a little spin.
I don't know.
Yeah, he was on the
100% sure.
when he was on the mediums.
Right. Okay. Oh yeah, he was the first onto the mediums. He was a bit.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I think Perez is definitely one that the jury's out on. I mean, we had this conversation a lot when Albon was in the car last year, that we sort of said, if the performance is come, he's all right, but he needs to pull it all together. And I think it's the same for Perez. At the same time, I think you could say that he's new to that car. He doesn't know that. He's only been in there for 2 races. He might be experienced in other cars. He's not necessarily experienced in the Red Bull yet, and that is something that he'll grow to learn to use, hopefully. And
if he's given the opportunity.
If he's given the opportunity. I can't see Perez getting sacked anytime soon. I'll say that.
If you look at Daniel Ricciardo at the minute, Lando Norris in the last 2 races has significantly outperformed Daniel Ricciardo.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's because Daniel Ricciardo is still getting used to the car.
Or
I think
another example, Sainz at Ferrari. Like, look at how well Leclerc did in that race compared to Sainz. Yeah, okay, they finished right next to each other, but Sainz really was struggling as well. He was. I don't understand how he held position for as long as he did, to be fair to Sainz, because he had a good couple spins in that race.
It was very interesting because every time he spun, he would really beat himself up over it. And then he would put out a great lap and make up so much time. But then obviously he was just losing that time because he kept making the same mistake.
Bit like you in the F1 game, Reece.
Yeah, cheers.
Right, let's move on to then a driver that Reece wants to put forward his 2 cents on. We've had Ruth's opinion on Perez. This is one that Reece want to have a bit of an opinion on, and I think in a more positive light, because after what was going to be a illustrious qualifying yesterday, until track limits ruined it, Lando Norris drove one of his best ever races out there today, going from 7th to 3rd, very nearly 2nd. It was a great race for him, wasn't it? Reece, just talk to us about Lando. You could talk all day about Lando. Give us a quick brief overview of that race and just how good it was.
I think it was extremely unlucky that he didn't get 2nd in qualifying. Was it 2nd or 3rd? It was 2nd, wasn't it?
It would have been 3rd if it's
right, 3rd. I think it was extremely unlucky that didn't happen. I mean, it was 2nd when the time got deleted. That's why I got that in my head.
Yeah.
But extremely unlucky that didn't happen. There was photos all over social media that had people on the same bit of the track that he was. That was apparently exceeding track limits. They got to keep their laps. But hey ho, we move. In the race, he had a cracking race. Very unfortunate when that red flag came for him. Because the team did in my opinion, did a perfect strategy. Lando actually fell down to 9th after the first lap. So he did really well to get it back up, to maintain 2nd from Hamilton. I mean, realistically, Hamilton should have took him about 4 laps prior to what he actually did. To maintain that 2nd for so long and to actually get a podium, it was a cracking race from Lando.
It was, and I'm really happy for him. I mean, it was the first time I think since 2012, one of the races in 2012, that we've had two British drivers on the podium, which is when Jenson and Lewis were last on it together. So that sense,
wasn't it the 700th or 400th time?
It was also the 700th time a British driver had been on a podium, 699th and 700th. Obviously, they were both on there. So in terms of that, that's a great stat, and it's great that we're seeing Lando properly coming through and grasping that car, much better now. He really impressed me in qualifying. I was gutted for him when he didn't get, that third place or that second place, whatever it would have been. I was absolutely gutted for him because you could see he got, watching him come round, he'd done purple, and then I think he just lost a bit of time in that final sector, and it wasn't quite the fastest lap. But to see that remove was really gut-wrenching, and I think that really drove him today to especially do a much better race.
What did you make of that, Ruth? Green.
Yeah.
Gone.
Yeah, well, yeah. What did you make of that, Ruth? What did you think of Lando's performance?
Yeah, I agree. It was an incredible performance, number one. Number two, the fact that he managed to hold Hamilton behind him for as long as he did without DRS. I was going to say DNF, and I was like, it's not DNF.
We'll
DRS.
have to phone Martin. We'll have to phone Martin here.
Without DNF, DRS, he held him behind for so long, so much longer than would have been expected of anyone else. So, yeah. I mean, he defends really well. It's just a shame that he just didn't have enough pace to hold Hamilton behind, probably because of his tyres as well.
Yeah.
Which is just one of those. But P3 is still a really, really great outcome from a race for a McLaren as well.
Yeah,
it's great to see a McLaren on the podium.
I mean, let's be honest, them tyres shouldn't have lasted as long as they did. I don't know where he got extra grip from in them tyres, but to make them softs go 20-something laps was unbelievable.
Yeah, exactly. And I think at that point as well, he knew that a pit stop would cost him too much and he wouldn't be able to make back the places. So he was really just defending and trying to crawl to the finish line without losing his place.
I think it was really interesting how that red flag fell and who decided to go for the softs and who decided to go for the mediums. That really interested me. And there was a great interview with Sky Sports that Lando did afterwards where he sort of spoke about his tyres and he said, we kind of weighed it up and decided that the advantage we get in terms of pace at the start on those softs would outweigh the negatives of grip we'd lose at the end. So it was a brave decision in the end to go for it, but it paid off because the pace he would have had on the mediums wouldn't have been enough to get him to the podium, but the pace on the softs was enough to get him up there, and then it was just a matter of defending once he had that position, and he did it perfectly.
I also said in the group chat as well that as a McLaren fan, we were quite lucky that it was a rolling start, not another start.
Not a standing start. Yeah,
that really helped us out because there would have been no way that the McLaren is looking good this season, but I don't think it would have been good enough to then fight off. I think Albon was behind him at that point as well. I don't think it would have been not.
Leclerc.
He came back.
Leclerc and Sainz were both behind him, weren't they?
And then the other Red Bull as well. I'm so tired today.
It's Perez.
Perez was also there sniffing away.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm actually going to just quickly interject whilst we're talking about that restart because Yuki Tsunoda, who I think he's going to really beat himself up over this weekend, he showed he's a rookie. I think that's fair enough. Last week we were singing his praises because he did really well last week. This week he had obviously that horrible incident in qualifying, which was really unlucky really to have caused the amount of damage it did. On any other circuit, that would have just been a spin. He did got going again, but unfortunately here it did mean his back end got wrecked, so he couldn't compete in qualifying. And in the race, he did really well for the first start to get himself up to 9th. He was right behind Lewis Hamilton and having a really good race up until that point. And then obviously, like I said, he's a rookie. That was his first proper go in F1 in wet conditions, and it was hard. He made that mistake and did spin out whilst he was trying to battle with the 7-time world champion.
Yeah, I think it was a shame for him because he went from P20 all the way to P8.
Yeah.
Which is insane to have been able to overtake that many drivers and still have pace to keep going. He overtook Hamilton, which, I mean, when have we ever been able to say this rookie, this new driver in an AlphaTauri has just overtaken a Mercedes.
Yeah.
Doesn't happen very often.
It was
Even if it
outfoxed
was
as
for
well,
a
rather
second
than
or
Even
so.
if it was for a second or so. But yeah, I think the spin was just really unfortunate.
It was.
Because originally I thought that Hamilton had tapped his back wheel and that's why he'd spun off. But I haven't actually seen the clip, so I'm not 100% sure. But I think it might have been a similar spin that Hamilton had, where he just got his wheel a bit too far onto the wet and it just pushed the rest of his car around.
I think it was pretty much the same as the mistake Perez made, where obviously there was a dry line and there was a wet line on the circuit, and I think Tsunoda just slightly got his wheels onto the wet, trying to get past Lewis.
I think that's the only issue with the Imola circuit when it's wet, because everyone follows the same dry line. When you overtake, you have to break the dry line. You have to go onto the wet, and it's just unpredictable when you're there. So
yeah, definitely.
But
it was a great race for him, nevertheless. What?
Never mind, carry on.
Let's just see something out the window.
Just some birds on a branch.
Oh.
Doing the dirty.
Oh, there you go.
All right, well, now it's
It
time
really
for Bird
distracted
Watch
me.
with
I'm
Ruth.
so sorry.
Sit down. That's staying in. Ruth, can you describe them for us, please?
It's just 2 pigeons. I've never seen a baby pigeon either, so
Well, there you go.
how exciting.
This is a Rearview podcast exclusive.
Autumn
Baby pigeons. Yuki Tsunoda, though, who is a baby pigeon of Formula 1. There we go, bring it full circle. It was a good race. He is a rookie. He made rookie mistakes, but it's proof that he still has got something. I'm looking forward to seeing him fully develop into a driver, and I think it's going to be a longer process than maybe what people have said he might do. He's not going to be there overnight. It might even take longer than a season, but the potential's there and it's clear, and I can't wait to see him fully develop into that 100%. Right then, let's talk about people getting onto the wet line and crashing. Most notably, the most important one, of course, was on lap 31, which was the worst lap to be on if you were a Mercedes driver. I think that's fair to say. And we'll start with the first half of that lap. Max and Lewis were trading blows. Fastest lap here, there, and everywhere. Trying to get past all these lap cars to get back to the front of the grid. And Lewis maybe was a bit too eager to get past Russell. Gets onto the wet side of the track. Takes a trip into the gravel and kisses the barrier. Let's talk about it. What happened there? Should Russell have done something different? Should he have let him through earlier? Something like that? Or was it just bad driving from the 7-time world champion? What do we think? Let's just hear what we think. Ruth, what did you think about it?
I think an interesting point just to say before is when Russell was interviewed at the end, he was saying that was the first time he'd seen the blue flag to let Hamilton through, and so he let him through at the earliest opportunity. And so really he couldn't have let him through any sooner because he was already in a fight, which is why they hadn't given him the blue flag before that point.
Yeah.
So really that was the first place he'd been able to give up that position, and he tried to. It was unfortunate that Hamilton had spun out, but again, that just comes with the track conditions. It could have happened to anyone there. He wasn't on the right line to really take that corner and to go around. It's not a very good place to overtake anyway, and as we've seen, everyone else who tried to overtake on that corner did the exact same thing.
Yeah.
So maybe it was Hamilton being a bit too eager to get past, and Russell wanting to please Lewis, giving up that position as quickly as he did. So really I think it was just mistakes from everyone there that really contributed to Hamilton losing out as much as he did.
Well, in the end, he didn't actually lose out.
Well, yeah.
As much as you think he might reach. What did you think there? Was it just Lewis being too eager, or was Russell in the wrong place?
I completely agree with what Reith said. I think Russell let him pass at the right opportunity. As you say, there is a dry line on the track because obviously it was a wet track, so there's a dry line. You go off the dry line, you're losing time. If Russell would have, let's say, moved over, he wouldn't have then been battling Bottas, which he felt like he could have took. And you don't want to impede your race to kind of let someone through on a blue flag. Like, you want to do it where it's both convenient for both of you. Right. I think Lewis was chasing down the lead of Max, and he was having hammer time if you will. But I think he pushed way too much on a wet surface.
I'm going to have a word with you guys because you've agreed too many times in this podcast. The reason I get you guys on every week is because you normally have a little cat fight and you disagree.
Hold on. It's not your podcast though, is it? Let's be real. The reason I get you guys on.
You normally have a bit of a cat fight. You have a bit of a disagreement.
We'll be having an argument with you in a minute if you take full control.
Right then, let's talk about the big one from lap 31. Russell and Bottas. It's the one that we could talk about for hours, I think. Whose fault was it? Which way did it go? Officially, the FIA have said racing incident, but I don't think it's quite as simple as that. Or maybe it is. I don't know. That's what I'm going to ask you guys. What do you think? Should Bottas have done the swerve? Should Russell have even been going for that manoeuvre? What do we think? Let's hear it. We'll go to Reese first.
Yeah. I don't know. It was exciting. I think that's all I can really say about it. I think George was looking fast, and obviously wanted to get past Bottas. It did look like he put a tyre onto the grass. Bottas also looked like he moved out to his right before then swerving back in and squeezed Russell. And obviously that got Bottas a little bonk on the head. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's, a bit 50-50, as in like George maybe shouldn't have put his wheel on the grass, but then if Bottas didn't push George over, would he have put his wheel on the grass? I don't know. We talked about it afterwards, Tom, and you said that there was a driver's agreement that Bottas wouldn't do what he did. Didn't we?
Yeah.
So maybe then it's Bottas's fault, considering it's a driver's agreement, but just because it's a driver's agreement doesn't mean that they've kind of got to stick by it, because it doesn't mean that they're going to get penalised, so...
Yeah, interesting. What do you think, Ruth?
Yeah, exactly. I feel like that's the problem with driver agreements about things. Mazepin on his first race broke one as well. The move that Bottas did on Russell is something Verstappen used to do a lot, and it's a defensive move where you slightly edge to the side, and because you're going at such a speed, it makes the other driver back off because they don't want you to cross over and cause a crash with them. So they will always back out of that overtake. And obviously Russell, at that point, he didn't slow down. He veered as well because he could see Bottas was moving across. And I think you have to remember they were both going so fast that even the slightest movement at the side of you is going to catch your attention, and you're instantly going to have to react. Yeah. That's the whole thing with...
This is you got to remember also, and I'm surprised not more people have picked up on this online, they both had DRS open at that point, and the way a car acts when DRS is open in terms of side to side is completely different if the DRS is closed. If you even turn the wheel like a little bit too much with the DRS open, the back end is gone. It's not going to follow with you. That's another reason it's so dangerous. Really.
I think the thing is as well is it's a wet track. Like it was so like even in the dry, like that's not on. It's like when Roman used to move over under braking, like he did that a couple of times last season. Moving under braking is dangerous. I'd argue what happened then with Bottas, and I feel like I'm now shooing the blame straight onto Bottas, but I feel like what happened with what he did was significantly more dangerous than moving under braking.
Yeah, I feel like Russell's reaction wasn't the best reaction either, so I definitely feel like both drivers have blame in this situation, which is why it's a racing incident, because there's no rule to stop Bottas from doing that or anything like that. So really, what can the FIA penalise them on? There's nothing there that in a rule says Bottas can't move across in that way. No. Otherwise he wouldn't have done it.
It's just a gentleman's agreement not to do that.
And so neither of them can be penalised for it. It's just a shame that both of them lost out so much. And obviously, as Russell said, P9 for him is an amazing achievement in a Williams.
It would have been 8 as well because of Lewis crashing out. He would have been up to 8th.
And for Bottas, it doesn't mean that much. And so for him to pull a move like that, it just... I feel like Russell just felt it was a bit more disrespectful for him to have done something like that anyway. I just feel like the way both drivers handled it at the end as well maybe wasn't the best. And obviously online, it literally, as soon as George Russell put out a tweet, it was like you could hear the Hamilton and Bottas fans running. Like, it literally was like that, and you would go to the comments, and all of the comments were awful. Like, were absolutely awful to read. And I just don't understand why people can't just say, okay, this was a racing incident, nothing more, nothing less. Both drivers could have done something differently. It is what it is.
Yeah, and I think it was interesting. Toto said afterwards when he was talking to Sky, he said literally the words, it's not 50-50, maybe it's 60-40, but I'm not going to say which way. So he obviously knows he thinks someone is more to blame, and by the fact he'd say, I'm not going to say each way, both of them are his drivers, Mercedes drivers, so he doesn't want to put the blame specifically on either of them. But yeah, you've got to say it was a stupid move really from both of them. Russell really should have known that overtaking there wasn't a great idea. It wasn't a great position to make a manoeuvre on because of the way the track was and the track conditions. But also Bottas knows he shouldn't have been so aggressive like that. It was never going to work well for either of them really.
I mean, people were on about after the incident, George went over and said, "Are you trying to get us both effing killed?"
Yeah.
Which obviously isn't the way to do it either. However, the fact that then Bottas, obviously that was out of pure frustration, and he's already explained that. Well, he hasn't already explained, but we've already explained on here that that's because obviously a Williams getting points is like pigs flying sort of thing. And then so the fact that then Bottas then flipped him the bird, people are having to go at Russell for giving Bottas a little tap on the head. But I mean, if someone literally shoved their finger in your face in point blank range, you would. Yeah. I think that it's very unfair to be like, Russell shouldn't have smacked him when one, it was like a tap, and he had a crash helmet on, and two, Bottas was just as much to blame. It was like in the incident, 50-50, both times.
Yeah, well, but I mean, Bottas said post that he couldn't hear what George was saying. It just looked aggressive, and that's why he said, "I just spoke with my finger," which I mean, yeah, okay, it's fair enough.
Imagine if George walked up and said, "Are you okay, mate?"
Yeah, I know.
He just gets the middle finger.
I think you could probably tell he was probably a bit angry though by his body language and things. But at the same time, I don't think Russell was trying to be overly. He wasn't trying to start stuff. He was going over and saying, "What are you doing? Are you trying to get us killed?" He wasn't starting directly on Bottas. He was I think more of a question. Then Bottas put the middle finger up at him. That probably then peeved him off more. So he bonked him on the head. Either way, it's not how it should have been dealt with. These guys are professional racing drivers. They should know how to respect each other. I don't think for a second that either of them probably look back on that with, very proudly at all. I'm sure both of them it's not the most proud moment for them, but yeah, it's one of those, isn't it? It's racing at the end of the day. So,
can we also talk about the fact that someone in the Williams team painted Russell's seat literally about 2 seconds before he sat in the car? Because he had black marks all over his bum.
It was actually a burn mark from the bottom of his car from when he had dragged Bottas. Because of the heat of the brakes and everything, apparently the heat had carried through underneath as well, especially when it was dragging along the concrete and the gravel. So the heat had risen through his seat and actually burned the bottom of his of his suit.
There you go.
That's mental.
That's why we have Ruth in here for lovely insights like that about bum burning.
We get one every
burning
couple
and
of
birds.
weeks,
because Bottas's car was also on fire because he'd taken most of the brunt, but George Russell had been dragged all along the actual track. So I think the heat was from all of that. So yeah.
I'm going to title this episode "Bum Burning and Birds." That's what we're going to go with for this one. Right then, this is the next point that I'm going to talk about because that there are conspiracists and people all over the Formula 1 community now looking at that crash with their tinfoil hats on because it played very nicely into the hands of Lewis Hamilton, who less than half a lap earlier had put it in the wall and reversed back onto the track, and very very nicely for him managed to perfectly time a safety car for a pit stop to put a new front wing on, and then also a red flag, so he could come back into the pits, and unlap himself, get some new tyres on, get the car repaired. It all went very well for him. There's going to be a lot of skeptics and theorists that, will be saying that this is Crashgate 2.0, that Bottas and Russell both took each other out to help Lewis back into the title fight. But what do you guys think? Is there any conspiracy there, or is it pure coincidence and luck that they just happened to have that crash at just the right time for Lewis? Ruth? Please tell me you got your tinfoil hat on today.
No, I absolutely believe it is ridiculous to think that two drivers would compromise both of their races for a world champion, especially when a Williams driver is in the points and Bottas is Bottas, who has recently said that he wants to race for himself and, put himself first rather than Hamilton. So, I don't know. There's a lot of conspiracy theories out there. I don't believe any of them, I'm afraid.
Okay. Reese, please tell me you got your tinfoil hat on.
Well, it's a bit, to happen at the same time. It's a bit absolutely stupid that people are on Twitter saying that people would essentially almost kill themselves in a crash for Lewis Hamilton. How stupid. I saw this question in the script and I was like, I'm just going to say no. But I'm quite angry about it, to be honest. It was a fast crash as well. I'm surprised those brown marks weren't something else on Russell's bum. It was so fast. You wouldn't have a crash. If you were to do it, you I think you messaged me during the race time and was like, oh, conspiracy theorists are out. And I said, if you were to do it, you just put your own car into the... if you were Bottas, you'd just put your own car into the wall to get a safety car out. You wouldn't...
how the original Crashgate happened.
You would not carry that much speed into a corner.
No, yeah.
The fact that Bottas was winded after as well, he'd had a massive shunt and he'd taken majority of the force. It's so ridiculous that people will be like, oh, Bottas did this so that Hamilton could have a great race again. It's I could understand Bottas relinquishing a position. Oh yeah, that is Bottas actually doing it. But crashing his car, I mean, come on.
The same thing as well. F1 drivers' lives are in danger when they're racing. When you're having a crash at I think it was almost 200 mile an hour. It was on one of the fastest parts on the track.
Yeah.
You wouldn't... I sound stupid saying it because, why would you even think it? You know what I mean? It wouldn't happen. Why would it happen? Why would you put your life, and not even your life, another person's life, in the hands of essentially fate so that you can get your teammate a red flag? They didn't even know the red flag was going to come out, for crying out loud.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah.
It very easily could have been a much worse crash as well. Very easily. Because in the actual video after, you can see that Russell and Bottas's wheels are basically tangled when they first go into the left side and then they go right.
Yeah.
You can see that both their wheels come up, and obviously had the halo not been there, or had the halo failed, or anything like that, very easily one of those drivers could have been hit in the head or lost their head completely when you think about how much force goes into a crash like that.
I think
it's so stupid to me that people will just try and say basically anything online.
Well, yeah. I think you also have to remember that the connotations that Imola carries. Obviously, Imola is a Grand Prix where, just under 30 years ago, Ayrton Senna and Roland Ratzenberger both lost their life in the same weekend. And that is the corner where they had that crash, is the corner where Ayrton Senna had his crash. So if they... I mean, I agree. It's not a chance in hell that is more than just a coincidence, or just Lewis Hamilton being very lucky once again. If it did come out, though, that was a conspiracy to make them crash, especially on that corner,
it would be absolute outrage.
Exactly.
The spot would be cancelled. You couldn't do that.
It would just be
the spot.
Yeah, it would just be atrocious, because obviously that is a corner that carries so many sort of connotations and history in it, and because of that, so Yeah, it's definitely one that.
I don't know why have we talked about it so long. Like, it's just a simple no, isn't it? Realistically,
well, yeah.
not we're trying to get a podcast out of it, but for crying out loud, like, no, it's not.
It
no.
should be as simple as that. Really, it shouldn't even be something people would question online.
Yeah.
Because it's just absolutely ridiculous to believe that people would compromise themselves in that way. It just is
the
crazy.
only thing that should be said online is holy sugar honey iced tea. I'm glad they're both still alive.
Yeah.
I'm glad they were able to walk away from it. I'm glad the worst injury was the fact that Bottas has got a little bit of a headache because he had his helmet slapped.
Yeah. I think the one thing we can take away from it, though, is that Lewis Hamilton is the luckiest man to have ever graced the planet. I mean, how many of the drivers are going to crash out, hit the wall, spend about 2 minutes reversing back and forward trying to get their car facing the right direction, then decide, I'm just going to reverse all the way back onto the track, have to change their front wing, and come out unscathed about 6 seconds behind the leader because of a red flag, putting them back unlapped into 9th place. I mean, he got so lucky, and I think that he wouldn't have got second place without that crash. I think that's fair to say. I think he'd have struggled to get points without that crash, realistically. What do we think? Is Lewis Hamilton the luckiest man? Very quickly, yes or no? Ruth?
Yeah.
Reese?
Your yes and no's are getting more ridiculous every week.
I love my yes and no question.
It's one of those things where you're basically forced to say what he wants you to say.
Yes.
So you're just like, fine.
I'm making my point.
Tom sits there, he's like, right, very quickly, yes or no. We say yes or no. And then Tom goes, yeah, well, I'm glad you said yes, because in my opinion, I just want to say about 5,000 words on the subject, and then we'll wrap it up.
There we go. Exactly. Lewis Hamilton, the luckiest man in Formula 1. It certainly was an eventful Grand Prix. And although we had to wait 3 weeks to get it, I'm glad we did. It was a long wait, but it was worth it because the rain, everything came together and made it such a good race. It's not quite as long of a wait until we get to Portimao for the Portuguese Grand Prix at the end of the month. So I think we need to make some predictions for it. And let's just start, we always start with the qualifying top 3. Ruth, take it away.
Okay. Hamilton, Verstappen. See, it's always this third that I feel like throws us for a hoop, because a lot of the drivers are very likely to be able to be there. So Hamilton,
Ruth didn't hear the bit that
Verstappen.
you said very quickly, Tom.
Hamilton, Verstappen, Leclerc.
Okay, I'm also just going to interject here. That is a Rearview podcast first. Ruth has included Hamilton in one of her predictions.
I've included him
Has that ever
before.
happened before?
I have.
Oh, it's not happening on mine.
I listened back to the predictions from last week just to try and find out.
And
'cause
yeah,
they
I
were
thought
ridiculous.
someone could have got it right. None of us put Hamilton in our top 3 predictions for qualifying.
Well, who
I don't know
was
why.
closest?
I don't know. I think I put
I feel like
Perez and
without
Verstappen in mine. I think
I feel
put
like without the-
Verstappen first, Perez second.
I think I put Sonoda in mine.
You did.
without the deletion of Lando's lap, I think I would have been closest because I think I did Max, Lando, Bottas. I think I
Right.
said.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think you did actually.
So,
Yeah. I think I got Perez right in second place. I think I put Verstappen in first place. So that wasn't right. But anyway, Reese, your prediction for this weekend.
I'm going to say Valtteri Bottas, Max Verstappen, Sergio Perez.
Interesting. I'm going to go for a similar mix on that. I'm going to go for first place Lewis Hamilton, second place Max Verstappen, third place Sergio Perez. I think next weekend in Portimao.
You think he's making a comeback?
I think it's going to be his weekend. I think he's going to have a good qualifying and a good race. He's going to get a
Wait,
podium.
was that qualifying and race, or was that just qualifying?
That was just qualifying. We'll do racing in a
Alright,
minute.
good.
Don't worry. Don't get out of yourself.
He was like, Bottas is in my
Yeah,
three.
Bottas is in
Let
the
me
top three.
change
Oh
it,
my God, what
please.
we're doing? It's like Perez ain't going to finish the race.
Well, let's do that now then. Let's do our race podium then. I'll go first. I think it's going to be Verstappen top. I think it's going to be Hamilton second, and I think it's going to be Perez third. That's my prediction for the podium.
Reese, you go next.
It's too late. I said it first.
Okay. I'm going to say Hamilton, Verstappen.
Your third place is where you reached.
Mazepin. That was an M. That was Mazepin.
I'd struggle with my third place because there's so many drivers that could get third place.
And you don't want Perez
it's
to
so
do well.
hard to pick.
God forbid if Perez gets it.
God forbid. That's not going to happen.
Sonoda again. Just whack him in there.
No. I'm going to say Norris again.
Ooh, Lando for another podium. Interesting. Reese, has she just trodden on your parade there?
No, because I think it's for the race. Now, I want it to be exciting. So I think Max and Lewis are going to be battling that much that one of them's either going to take the other one out or they're both going to go out.
Ooh.
So I'm going to say that Sergio Perez will come third. Tom got his hopes up then. I think Valtteri Bottas will win the race. I'm not your normal guy who does a 1, 2, 3. And I think in second,
He likes to keep us
did a
guessing.
3-1-2.
I've done a 3, 1, 2. I think in second, we're going to see. I really want to say Carlos Sainz, but it's going to be Charles Leclerc.
Interesting.
That's
you think
interesting.
Ferrari will finally get that podium that they, I think, have deserved. They've been they've been good.
I
Ferrari
think
looking
both
good.
Leclerc and Sainz were really good in that race.
Yeah.
I have to say as well, Sainz, even though he made so many mistakes, at least is consistent.
At least he's
a consistent driver. You can't take it away from the
there
man.
you go.
I'll tell you what, to get fifth as well after all them mistakes.
It was
What a
impressive,
drive.
definitely.
Can I just say as well before you wrap up? I always forget that we record faces,
right?
Because we never used to, and sometimes when Tom talks, I look disinterested. So just don't take it to heart. Yeah, I always forget that it's on, so I'm like looking down and looking around the room and itching my nose and stuff. So,
you got your pick in your nose on there.
He never does it when I'm talking though, so it's fine.
He's always
just yawn during Ruth. I always yawn.
Well, hopefully it'll be a cracker either way of a race. And of course, we'll be back with another episode right after it. So until then, I've been Reese.
I've been producer Ruth.
Bye!
Bye!